Mic check, good. So I'm Max Ceron, CWB Association Welding podcast. Today we have a really cool guest, Welding podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and as always, I am out there trying to find the best voices and stories for you, our faithful listeners. Today, I have a fantastic man who has a storied career here across Canada and into the spectral universe. His name is Jim Galloway. He is a faculty at Conestoga College and just on the cusp of entering into retirement. Jim, how are you doing?
Great, Max. Thanks for having me on.
How'd you like that introduction?
Oh, wonderful. On the cusp. I don't know what that actually means, but I'm on the precipice.
Exactly. Well, hopefully it's not a drop; it's a climb. But
well, it's a change.
That's right. So Jim, for the people that don't know you, you've been an instructor for a long time. I met you. You've been an instructor the whole time I've known you, but. There's probably a story which many, many people don't know, which is, where did Jim come from? So why don't we start right at the start with the story for everyone? And let me ask the question, Jim, where do you call roots? What's home? Where was baby Jim from?
Well, I grew up in Brantford,
okay,
which is, of course, the famous town where Wayne Gretzky came from.
Mm-hmm.
He's a little bit older than me, but
just a little.
I grew up in Brantford, and it's southwestern Ontario, sort of industrial city, and I grew up there, and sort of middle class lifestyle. My dad worked in the roads department at the county, and my mom was a homemaker, and got 3 brothers and a sister, and basically a normal upbringing at the Brantford city suburbs. So it was a normal
kid life, Canadian kid life, right?
Canadian kid life, yeah. That was pretty standard,
So
you grew up, you went to school, and then you didn't know what happened next. So
well, in those eras, you're coming up in the 70s, right? I'm trying to get the timelines right here without saying age numbers, but so much of the push, I would say from the 50s to now, has been that your children must go to university, your children must enter some type of, professional education, don't get dirty, don't get your hands into these trades or stuff like that. Now, for yourself, what was the upbringing like around that image? What was the expectation of you growing up to go, get an education, and what did the family think you were going to do?
Well, I have to say that in my circle of friends, the people that I hung around with, not many, very few went to university.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
it wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
In a lot of societies, a lot of groups, neighborhoods, whatever. Yeah, university was something that some people did, but not nearly to the numbers that people do in this day and age.
Yeah.
For the most of the people that I knew, it was you went to high school and you went off and got a job. If you were fortunate, you might go into a trade.
Mm-hmm.
But there was this other organization known as a technical college or community college, and that was another option. But even there, not many of my friends, a few of them maybe, went to college. But really, the people I hung with as a teenager, very few went to university. It wasn't as big a thing as you hear about now, where it's like every other kid goes to university. It just wasn't done.
It's like you have to now. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's one of the things that I've always been a proponent, and I'm not sure what happened across the country, but in the late 60s in Ontario, the province established the in-between institution, which were the colleges. And there was a large network of colleges in Ontario that filled the gap between skilled trades or even they did teach skilled trades, but it also filled the gap between just going off to the workplace straight out
Yeah.
of high school
Between work and
and
university, that vocational
yeah,
space. Yeah.
yeah. So actually it was a fairly new thing, I guess, from the standpoint of time,
Mm-hmm.
because it really had only been around for about 10 years before I
Yeah.
encountered that option. But certainly in high school and whatnot, our school had a good strong focus on it was a collegiate and vocational school. So
Mm-hmm.
you had both options. You could go more towards the business and potentially academic side, or you can go more towards the trades. And certainly my in terms of my siblings and my friends, um, the prospect of going straight to university wasn't
It was
wasn't
almost
well known.
unattainable. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, not unobtainable. It's just it just didn't occur to a lot of people.
Yeah. Okay.
In those days, in the 70s, and a lot of people could get a very decent middle class lifestyle by graduating from high school and getting a job in a
Going out into the
factory
workforce.
or
Yeah.
whatever. And a
Yeah.
lot of people, that's what there was sort of this. And I looked at it in the past, there was this big group of people who graduated from high school and immediately they got married and had kids. There
Mm-hmm.
was a whole bunch of them that I knew,
Yeah.
and and they got a job and they worked in a factory or whatever, and
And they were fine.
bought a
Yeah.
house, and it was
Yeah.
actually very, very, very okay.
Yeah.
But
Now
there
for
was
you,
a
like,
few of us that, it just wasn't. I didn't see that pathway.
yeah. What
So
was it
so
that you thought you wanted to do? You know,
I didn't really
if I would have walked into your grade 9 class and said, "Hey, Jim, what do you want to do?"
Well, one of the cool things that at the high school, as it was when I went there, if you chose a technical or trades vocation
Mm-hmm.
pathway, they gave you an exploratory 2 years where you could take, um, and they had it fairly well set up with different shops and trades, if you will. But for example, you basically took short courses in each of them.
Mm-hmm.
You
Kind
went
of
to the
made the
wood
round,
shop.
you know.
Yeah, you went to the wood shop, you went to the auto shop, you went to the machine shop. They even had a printing shop, like printing presses. And I took that course, and it was really cool. Like they
That's
had these
awesome. Yeah.
printing presses and stuff, and layout text, and
Mm-hmm.
and it was pretty interesting. But one of them for me was welding, and so I hadn't really thought of welding as an option at all. But it was just one of the things we cycled through.
Yeah.
And that was the one that kind of struck me. And a lot of it, when I think back, was driven by the connection to the teacher at the time.
So much of what I hear on this show in my career working with students is that one mentor, that one person that kind of guided people into perhaps not that they were necessarily unsure or indecisive, but opened their eyes to opportunities to things that perhaps weren't immediately obvious to them. And was this person, this teacher, were they I guess focused on welding, or they just were able to match you well?
No, he was an iron worker,
Oh
actually.
yeah,
I'm not
okay,
sure
awesome.
how
Yeah.
he ended up teaching at the high school, but he had been an iron worker. He'd worked
Mm-hmm.
on the CN Tower and like
Oh
big
wow.
big
Mm-hmm.
jobs down in Toronto, yeah, which was a big thing back in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
But and yeah, so he had left that trade, maybe settled down with his wife or whatever,
Yeah.
and started teaching high school. And so in terms of welding, he was very passionate, very 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 good at it, but he also made it interesting.
That's right. Yeah.
And so it wasn't for me, because I could see I was interested in a lot of things, but nothing really struck me. Oh, I got to go into this or that. Actually, electrical things like electronics and whatnot, I had a big interest in that. So I could have easily had have gone in that direction had this particular teacher showed me welding. Okay, I'll go learn to weld. It's a good thing to know how to do. But he actually made it very interesting, and it was way more than just burning rods. He
Yeah.
actually had a strong theory program for us, and so when it basically after exploring machine shop was another thing I enjoyed, um, and so when it came time after grade 10, I guess it would be, so grade 9, 10, we had these exploratory sessions, and in grade 10 we had we had to decide if you were going to major in one of those particular fields. And I don't remember being talked into it. I just said, well, welding was pretty cool, and so that was the one I ended up in. I was, I guess, reasonably good at it. I had a good connection with the teacher. A couple of my buddies were going to go down the same pathway, and not with really a job in mind, but it just
Something
welding
to
was
do.
pretty.
Yeah.
Welding seemed to be something I was actually reasonably good at, and the teacher made it interesting. So yeah, in grade 10 and 11, I was able to major in welding in high school. And
So then, you graduate high school.
well, even
And
before that, though, I
yeah,
was just thinking in grade 11, the students today don't believe me, but in grade 11, the teacher we had to take metallurgy.
like
So
just
grade
basic
11 high
metallurgy.
school,
Yeah.
I'm studying the iron carbon phase diagram,
Yeah.
and we had to memorize it.
Yeah.
And then we had to write reports. Like I remember one of the funny stories, I guess he saw me as one of the kids he could maybe give something more challenging to. So
Mm-hmm.
he said, okay, Gallo, everybody had to write a report about how to weld a different type of metal. One kid got aluminum, another kid gets steel, and Galloway, you get titanium. Titanium and zirconium.
Yeah. Good
I thought,
luck.
I haven't even heard of this stuff. What are you talking about? How do you weld it? How do I find information on this? So, you got to pedal down to the public library and try to get information and write
Start
a
with the
little report
periodic
on it.
table.
Yeah, and so, but it was cool. But I'll get to this again later. But
Yeah.
that came right back to haunt me, or actually not haunt me. It was a good thing because I'd actually heard of this stuff and how to weld it. And then in grade 12, the guy had us. Then it was welding processes in grade 12, and this teacher, he set up a model shop, essentially a factory where we built these sort of garage type wood stoves for people.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a production line set up, and we went to a local fab shop and did all the press brake work, and we had to fit it all and weld it all, and then line them with bricks and put the glass in and everything, and buy all the pieces and build these things and paint them, and then the school sold them to make a few bucks for the shop.
Wow, that sounds like an amazing program.
It was unbelievable. And then
like the cost of that is almost undoable today. Like,
well, I guess so, but I also did all position SMAW stick tickets where we didn't actually have the bureau in, but we had a high school ticket, which is a simulation of the bureau's the W47-1 test.
Yeah, like I go to high schools now.
In high school.
Yeah, I go to high schools now, and the entire welding program for the year has a $1,500 budget for a welding program for the year. I mean, that's not even one kid to weld a box of 7018.
It's horrible.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a mindset change not too long after I left, where they basically decimated a lot of those shops
everywhere
around.
Everywhere, yeah.
And it's pitiful. But they turned my understanding was they turned the welding shop into a theater arts class, because apparently there's a lot of jobs for actors in Brantford, but
act happy.
So anyway, I was very fortunate to have gone through that program with if y'all mention his name. His name's Jim Graham. I don't know if he's still with us. I haven't spoken to him in a long time, but he was a great guy, and a lot of students really did well in his class. So yeah.
Well, when you have a great teacher, you have great students. It's usually a two-way street, So.
Oh yeah. And so several of us did really well, and as it turned out, my older brother's friend had gone through the same thing as I had, and he said, well, what are you going to do after? And he actually went to one of the colleges, which is an hour drive from where I grew up. That's Conestoga, and he took this welding technician program that I'd never even heard of before, but he had sort of paved the way. So I got talking to him, and then the opportunity to go to college came up after high school.
So I was going to ask, did you get into working as a welder or in the trades out of high school, or did you go to college to continue training, or both, a combination?
Well, the high school teacher had connected us with some jobs, and one of the things that happened with me is I ended up working part-time after school. I had a couple other part-time jobs, but one of them was to work in a local machine shop as a as a
A helper,
like building
laborer.
tables and
Yeah.
stuff, and just doing a bit of welding and fitting and whatnot, just on a sort of as needed basis. So,
And then how long before you went and started at the college between high school and
oh, I right
enrolling?
after high school, I
Right
was
after?
17. I walked in the
Yeah.
door at high school in the
Yeah.
welding technician. It was welding engineering technician
And so
back in.
that program, and it's for someone from the West, right? I'm in Saskatchewan. That's where I cut my teeth. We've never had that kind of technician, allocation for the welding industry. It's been like welding, fab, and we never had what has evolved now to be like the wet program in Ontario, which is one of the best in the world. Alberta now has wet programs, these welding engineering technician
Yeah,
programs. In Saskatchewan, they never existed, and they still don't exist to this day. And it's amazing
like
for me to hear that these programs have been around for so long in places like Ontario. Like, I mean, they really seem to be wonderful programs.
well, the welding engineering technician program that I went to, the college Conestoga was teaching welding right from the get-go in '67,
Right, right.
but more like the welder fitter program.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then they started the technician program. These two guys started it back in the '70s, convincing the college and the industry needed it. Someone that was sort of between a skilled tradesperson and an engineer, and it
Mm-hmm.
was this welding engineering technician program. And they started that back in '72. And by the time I entered it and graduated, there was grads from our program that were interviewing us for jobs in industry. So it was quite a going concern in its day.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I certainly didn't pave the way, but that program, there's one up in Northern Ontario. Northern College had a program, but that was basically it in Ontario
Yeah.
for that in between the welder and the engineer type program. It was the welding engineering technician, which later became a technologist, which added a third year to it
Yeah.
quite a bit later.
Well, it's interesting because that need that between the engineer and the welder fitter is much more obvious in a manufacturing plant, especially when you're trying to really, really trying to dial in times, and production runs and the science of manufacturing, which is why I think provinces like Ontario, which were very early in the game, very manufacturing heavy, developed these programs. Whereas in Saskatchewan, we've never really gotten into manufacturing until the 90s. It was basically here was like oil and gas, agriculture, mining, which are, kind of just straight up welding skill type programs, right?
Yeah, it was interesting in Ontario. There was sort of two big directions that people would go. One was to heavy industry,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one was to manufacturing. So there was a lot of, automotive production plants, large ones that
Yeah.
would need a sort of this person to help set up the automated welding technology and robots eventually.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly the other big career path was in the power plant construction.
Right. Power
And when
generation. Mm-hmm.
the nuclear power industry was taking off, and they needed someone who could deal with welding at a more technical level to deal with the procedures and code compliance and inspection and non-destructive testing. And that's essentially the career path that I ended up was going down more the inspection NDT procedure development role, as opposed to just the working in a factory. So yeah, so it was interesting from that perspective. Very heavy focus on welding skills in the first like the first year especially. The interesting thing is most of us came from a program like I mentioned where I could weld. Like I
Mm-hmm.
like
You knew how
you
to
didn't have
weld.
to
Yeah.
teach me one end of a welding machine from the other.
Mm-hmm.
But it was funny actually. I remember the first day of college. The fellow that was sort of the program coordinator at the time, and he was came from Holland after World War II, and grew up as a starving kid and stuff. He was a tough nut.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sitting there, I'm 17 years old, bunch of other young guys sitting around this room, didn't know anybody. And he walks in and just starts yelling at us and threatening us and telling us, if you want to be a welder, get out. Welding programs down the hall. You're in the welding technician program. So it's pretty cool. But he was big on layout, engineering drawings,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was really, really tough program. It was good.
Well,
Enjoyed it though.
in my 35 years in the industry, I've seen an evolution of programs, curriculum, and lots of it's pushed towards fabrication, higher understanding of that side of the industry. But when I've watched how the WET programs have developed in Ontario and Alberta, and I've watched closely since I was young because they're always very interesting for me. I have 2 red seals, but my 2 red seals don't add up to a technician program, right? Like it's a different thing, right? And I've seen even in the last few years they've added, like if you want to take robotics in the last year, or if you want to go down the inspection route or procedure development, there's like branches even now within the wet programs. When you were in the college, what was the wet program? What was it to you when you went and did the program? What were the steps that you had to learn?
Well, it was all welding fundamentals, engineering drawings. It was all the welding process theory, and then that was mainly the year one. A lot
Yeah.
of time in the shop but we were doing not just welding skills development, we were also doing experiments like how do we get from short circuiting transfer to spray transfer? And we'd have these labs that we'd have to do in addition to the welding skills stuff. And so we would have to be experimenting. We all the different processes that were of standard at the time. And certainly we were challenged to try through a series of labs and whatnot to develop procedures and whatnot. And that was year one. In year two, the focus was on metallurgy, non-destructive testing, and then electrical troubleshooting and equipment side. So we actually had courses like that and some really good instructors. It was a really interesting program.
And it was a certificate or a diploma program when you took
it?
It
was in Ontario, a certificate is a 1-year program, a diploma is a 2-year program, and an advanced diploma is a 3-year program.
Okay.
So at the time they only had the 2-year program. So I actually had to, after graduating and working, I ended up adding my 3rd year in metallurgy part-time later. But at the time I graduated from the 2-year program.
All right. So Jim graduates his 2-year program, feeling pretty confident with himself and his understanding of welding and the ability to get out there and conquer the world as a welding engineering technician. Where'd you go? Where'd you go work? What was your main guiding light at that time?
It's interesting because a lot of at the time, and you wouldn't know this, but in the early 80s, around 1980, 81, out west was booming, Alberta. And my brother's friend who had graduated a year or two before me, he actually went out to Alberta and he's still there. He retired out there. And I was thinking he was making good money, and he was doing inspection in the pipeline and the oil and gas. And I thought that's what I wanted to do. Of course, in 1982, they had this thing called a recession, and the oil price of oil collapsed. And oh my gosh, you couldn't find a job for love nor money, right? It was terrible times out west and whatnot. But luckily, the other opportunity was in my case, it was Ontario Hydro, which is now Ontario Power Generation. And I actually ended up working at what is now called Bruce Power.
Bruce Power,
which is at the time was the largest construction project in North America, and building at the time they were building Bruce B, which is 4 850 megawatt reactors at Bruce, and they already had 4 built. They were also finishing Pickering B around the same time out east of Toronto, and they're gearing up for Darlington. So when I showed up at this job, basically they came to college to recruit us, and a handful of us ended up working up there, and they did some tough interviews and whatnot, and ended up being recruited straight out of school and dragged up to live in a construction camp at Bruce Power. It was kind of remote at the time, but yeah, it was very, very. My eyes were as big as saucers when I showed up, and you get to walk around this reactor, and here I was still, I guess, 19 years old, and I'm inspecting welds for these 50-year-old Boilermakers and stuff, and
and it's all new build. Those projects that you come across in your career, when you're young, if you get a couple big ones, you kind of feel like you're going to find these jobs for the rest of your life. But as you get older, you realize these major construction projects are not as often as you think they're going to be. And if you get to be a part of one, especially like a new construction build of a $1 billion plus dollar projects, they're really, really an interesting, world to be a part of for a while.
Yeah, it was fascinating.
Yeah.
I couldn't get enough of it. And one of the funny things that happened to me was because I knew they were going to, I wanted to get this job because
Mm-hmm.
other jobs are hard to come by. And so I thought, well, what do they do? They do a lot of pressure code welding. I better study the ASME boiler and pressure
ASME,
vessel
yeah,
code.
yeah.
So I was reading ASME 9 front to back and inside
ASME
out and
8, yeah.
backwards. And then, so of course they came to interview me, and one of the guys was a grad from our program from a few years before. And he starts asking questions about ASME Section 9, and I kept answering the questions until he finally just gave up. We just kept going up and up and up. And so anyway, so a bunch of us get the job up there, and we all show up on our first day. And so, okay, which one of you is Galloway? Okay, Galloway, you're going to the test shop because you're good with ASME Section 9. What? So
I guess so.
and all my buddies got to go to the big plant and do field inspection and get NDE tickets. Basically, then I went to the test shop and bent coupons for welders track
Yeah,
doing
pipe
their
coupons.
yeah. Basically, I bent their coupons and wrote up their paperwork for about 6 months. So
Well,
and so I
you
ended
worked
up doing
yourself into a
that.
corner.
Yeah, I know. But my buddies were working all this overtime, but I didn't get any overtime. But basically, I puttered around I got a little dirt bike and explored the area. It was good. I had a
Yeah.
good summer, a good 6 months or so through there.
And
And
then what happened? Did you stick around the power industry, or
oh
where did...
no, so then I whined until they moved me out of that and into the big power plant doing NDE. So I was doing field
Mhm.
inspection, visual inspection, and mag particle liquid penetrant, and doing piping inspection of the new build, working with the UA pipe fitters and the boiler makers and the iron workers, mainly the steam fitters and the boiler makers because there's a lot of piping. But crawling around inside pipes and doing visuals and doing mag particle and chasing around after boiler makers and showing them where their repair is going to be, and it was just field inspection. It was good, yeah.
And
But
it's wild for young people that are listening to this right now, because you're talking about work that you did, 30, 40 years ago. And it's still the same terms. You're talking about NDE, and you're still talking about mag particle, liquid penetration. I mean, it's seems like it was so long ago, and it seems like we've advanced so far, but yet at the end of the day, it's kind of still the same game.
I would be very familiar with the welding process and procedures they're doing on the same job today.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it's going to be exactly the same.
Exactly.
The only thing that's different is the people are younger and I'm older. Roles have reversed.
Yeah. Now, how long were you a part of the OPG family back then?
Well, what the interesting thing is, then a opportunity came up internally. So I was up Bruce, out in, southwestern Ontario, and an opportunity came up in the internal postings of, hey, welding technician, Ontario Hydro Research Division. Well, that sounds cool.
That sounds cool, yeah.
Yeah, but it's in Toronto. So I applied and ended up getting a job in their welding research group as a 20-year-old technician, essentially, by that time.
So what year is this?
Oh, 83.
83, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm working in a welding research lab. And the people there just thought I was a welder. They didn't know who, they just needed someone to do their welds and stuff for them.
Who's this kid?
Yeah, exactly. And they were doing some really cool stuff, and they had some really cool equipment. And here I am, like a kid in a toy store, right? This is great. And then they also figured out that I could write reports and new metallurgy, and so then they started using me for more serious research projects, not just doing their welds. Yeah.
And what kind of stuff would they need to research internally for the company? You're coming up in a world where they're like nuclear. When the nuclear industry came out big, there was a lot of scrambling to come up with procedures and developments of how things were going to do. A lot of it was, build it and they will come kind of mentality and figure it out after. Once things start to calm down, right, then there's a lot of going back and procedure development and standardization. I'd imagine that that's kind of where this bubble fits in, right? Or
Well, there was a big push to look at more automated welding for pipe welding. There was a
Mhm.
big push to do you know, pulse gas metal arc was a huge thing they wanted to go more into, and automated orbital pipe welding systems. So I
Yeah.
was doing a lot of work with instrument tube welding, like little tiny tubes, like 3/8 tubes for instrumentation that were
Mhm.
they had some problems welding those, and there's a big research program to solve that problem. So I worked on that. But I also got involved in failure analysis. So a weld would break somewhere, or then I would maybe be part of a team to help investigate the failure. Uh, Went to a lot of power plants. So they would send me out to actually talk to the welders, and if they had problems with the certain types of welding electrodes or whatever, I'd have to go and investigate it.
Mhm.
There was always stuff to do. It was really fascinating, and I got to go all over the place and go back to the places like the Bruce, saying, "Hey, what are you doing back here?" And that, but also I helped them develop new welding procedures. So if they wanted to
Yeah.
do, say, stainless flux core. We'd never done L-earth flux core. Heavy stainless was done with stick welding, and so. But there's this new stainless flux core, so we need a welding procedure. So develop a welding procedure, and I go weld it, and then we get it tested, qualified, and you know, to ASME code, and so I do a lot of that stuff, and
Yeah.
we're also researching how to encapsulate radioactive fuel in titanium and Inconels and heavy copper, and we had um,
For
you
like
know,
the waste product, I guess, right?
well, the high level radioactive waste
Yeah.
containment systems,
Yeah.
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 So I ended up working on that over, on and off, all the way up until I left there. Yeah. So
So how
also
long were you there
robotics.
for?
I was there till 96.
Okay, so
So
13 years. That's a long time.
yeah, 13 years, 14 years with Ontario Hydro, but
Mhm.
13 years at the lab. We also they were getting into robotics. And people, students are shocked, but I used my first robot is 83 or 84, and it was
Yeah.
doing it was doing ultrasonic inspection. And here I am, like I hadn't even seen a robot before. Next thing I'm programming one to do ultrasonic inspection, and
Well, and did you have the punch cards back then to program it?
no, it was I forget. I don't. There was there was big gigantic floppy disks.
Yeah, I remember the
Yeah,
big like
yeah,
10
like
inch.
12 inches or
Yeah,
something. It
yeah,
was pretty.
yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so I was doing all that. It was just like mind blowing for people nowadays. The through the arc seam tracking, laser vision systems, uh, robotic field welding. We had a portable field welding robot that we worked with. Hydro Quebec actually developed most of it, but I was working on adding welding processes and gouging to the front end of it, and working with the people from Hydro Quebec.
That's
Just
awesome.
really cool projects, and a lot of metallurgy too. I got involved in a lot of metallurgical research. Welding flux core and chromolyes and tempered bead welding, and it was so fascinating because it was like going to school for 13 years, learning from some super bright metallurgists and people like that, and that was basically what I did. It was like you almost like you didn't have to pay me to go there. You
Mhm.
just can I just go play, and but they did pay me, and it was a decent job, and I was living in Toronto and whatnot. I had a
Yeah.
apartment in Toronto and whatnot. So
Well,
yeah,
it's so interesting hearing your stories. I started welding in 93
yeah,
and I worked for heavy industry most of my career. And hearing you talk about the things that you were developing and working on were the exact same things I was doing, right?
yeah, yeah,
I'm welding 052 flux core stainless because it's the new thing on the market.
yeah, yeah,
It's the new thing. Find where are you going to get the procedures from? Well, that wasn't me, but it would come from somewhere, right? And someone
yeah,
would
yeah,
give it to
yeah,
me, and I'd have to follow it. And then like the heavy cladding of the coppers that got into style for a while, and then
yeah,
it was like the dissimilar metals, and then Inconel got huge, right? Everything kind of has a cycle of popularity kind of in the metallurgy world where it's like this new alloy, everyone
yeah,
jumps on it, runs with it, and then 10 years later they're like, actually, no, it didn't work that well. Let's try something else.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, but again, in those days, Ontario Hydro was booming in terms of as a
Yeah.
large construction company. Like
Yeah.
we were building power plants, and they needed procedures and support all over the place, and it was
Mhm.
a very very fun times.
It
But
sounds
then
really
that all
dynamic.
came
Yeah. Yeah.
that didn't last forever, because after they'd sort of built all the power plants they needed, they sort of stopped building them. And I had a secure job, but it would have meant leaving the lab. They're kind of winding down the welding lab
Mhm.
activities because there was less and less new welding procedures. And
Yeah.
then money
It's
was
just
getting
maintenance.
tighter,
It's
and
just maintenance after that, right? So.
yeah, and I could have. I had an opportunity to go move to one of the power plants at and support, but it would have been less research and just more routine stuff. And I wouldn't have got laid off or anything, because by that time I had some pretty decent experience and whatnot.
Mhm.
But my job would have changed. It wouldn't have been as interesting, perhaps. So
So,
less welding and
so at what
oriented.
point there, where did you go?
Well, then I had an opportunity to leave, and so it was, I guess, 96. I basically, it was, we're going to shut your department down, and you're going to move to the power plant the other side of Toronto. And I just had a house and stuff, and so well, I'll just leave and go do something else. So
Yeah.
I ended up
Yeah.
going to work at a large company in Hamilton that made railway cars.
Oh yeah.
And essentially my job was their R&D coordinator. They wanted to invest a lot in new technologies and robotics and automation, and they needed somebody who could do that. So they offered me the position, and I joined them and basically it was thrown right into the manufacturing fire of a heavy duty. This was a huge shop. Like, this is I'd say at the time, and maybe still is, it was probably the largest welding shop in Canada in
Yeah.
terms of volume of metal put down and number of people. Like, and
Yeah. We got a couple big I mean, Saskatchewan's rail center.
yeah, yeah,
We got some big like Procore and GE. We have lots of like
yeah.
really large rail yards out here, and that's heavy work. That's
Oh
not
man,
easy
yeah,
work. That's not. And they're one of the best paying jobs. I remember, like, when I was teaching at the college here, the students would be like, "Hey, I got an opportunity to go work at Procore or at G." It's like,
yeah,
man, awesome. Like, they're gonna pay you $30 an hour right out the door for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Talk to me in 6 weeks. See how you feel about it. 'Cause
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
hard
Well, it's high
job.
production, man, and
Yeah,
they
yeah,
were. I think there was like 2,000 people, and 1,200 of them were welders when I was there.
that's good. Yeah, that's lots.
800
Yeah,
welding machines.
yeah.
Yeah.
You're
So
rocking and rolling. You're pulling that power from Bruce Power pretty hard. Yeah.
yeah, and uh, truckloads of welding wire coming through that place.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Just nonstop
and
pallets. Yeah.
but also, so I go take this job, and you know the guy who wanted me there to help him, he started butting heads with senior management. And
Mm-hmm.
one day I showed up, and the president wants to see you. I thought, oh my gosh, the president wants to see me. So I go trundling down to the president's office, and basically half jokingly, yeah, we just fired your boss, and we're going to put you in his job, and if we don't like it, we're going to fire you too. Oh, okay.
Not much for negotiating, eh?
Well, half joking, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
they didn't really fire the other guy. You had to know how to take these people, but they
yeah.
meant business, man.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And
Money's
so
money. Like, at the end of the day, we're just
yeah,
tools that they need to make money, right? So
well, they had certain philosophy of how they wanted to do things, and something you had to toe the line, right? So
yeah, yeah.
I ended up being promoted by default, I guess. So now I'm sort of
Acclamation.
running the welding technology business at this company. So I had a bunch of people working for me. I had all the welding maintenance people who fixed all the equipment and kept the lines running, and I
Yeah,
had the welding training school and all the welding procedures. And I was basically, and I had a technologist working for me on the welding procedures, and the people who ran the welding services group, we called it, and then the welding training school was all under my. So next thing you know, I got like 75 people working for me. So
yeah. What the heck?
yeah, it was tough. But I learned so much there. Oh my
Mm-hmm,
gosh, you
mm-hmm.
really learn from the companies that are tough, right? So
Absolutely, absolutely.
yeah, so I learned a lot about managing and welding process, and you couldn't. It was like, again, it was like a candy land for people who like a lot of weld metal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
So what was
So,
next after the rail yard?
well, then I got headhunted, I guess, to a job closer to home,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a company that made plastic injection molding machinery.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a big company north of Toronto. It's called Husky Injection Moldings, and and they were just starting up a new automated welding and fab shop, and they needed someone to basically help them. Again, my job wasn't in management; it was manufacturing engineering was my job title there.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, it was but it was a greenfield, brand new building. I walked in the doors like a hockey arena with nothing in it, right? There was
Wow.
basically
Yeah.
no machinery yet, and we had to hire all the people and get all the
Outfit it all,
procedures
yeah.
and all the techniques down and get the machinery, well, laser cutting and robots and CNC press brakes, and it was really cool. And but again, there I went to this non-management position, so I could sort of say technical. And next thing you know, every time I came in, somebody else got, it was rough there in terms of turnover of
Changeover, yeah,
managers. Let's
yeah.
put it that way. And so I guess they finally fired everybody else and said, "Well, put him in charge because he's still here, so he still shows up every day, so we'll get him to be in charge." So next thing you know, I'm manufacturing manager. So I had a whole bunch of welder fitters and the manufacturing engineering support and machinists and painters and everybody working for me in this. But it was a really cool shop too. But I worked a lot of hours
Yeah.
trying to get that place up and running. Yeah. And
Startup companies or like fresh developments within a
Yeah.
company are so fun, but also so stressful.
well, yeah, I was a good-looking, dark-haired young fellow when I went there, and now almost
Look
like
at what
you.
happened to you.
But
Yeah.
next thing you know, I've gained
All
a few
gray.
pounds, and my hair turned gray, and I'm walking a little bit
Yeah,
slower than I
yeah.
used to.
All right. So what came after the plant then? After that manufacturing plant, injection molding plant?
Well, the whole time I had been volunteering at Conestoga's advisory committee, so
Hmm.
I had been on their program advisory committee. So
Got to know
one
the
of the
people
fellows
there. Yeah.
one of the fellows there basically said, "Hey, well, we've got some retirements coming up. How would you like to get home for
Mhm.
dinner with your family every evening and be a college teacher?" I said, maybe not such a bad idea, but the hitch was you had to take a giant cut and pay.
Yeah.
So,
That's
but
always the catch.
that was a catch. So, but I had a pretty, by that time we had a young family, and I thought it'd be kind of nice to get to know the kids before they're out of the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I took the position at the college teaching in the WellTech program.
All right. Well, that seems like the perfect segue to take our break here for the advertisers. I was
Okay.
before we started the conversation, the podcast today, we talked off camera about how are we going to encapsulate your life within an hour because it's such a wild ride. I think we're doing pretty good. We're doing pretty good.
Oh yeah, good.
Yeah. All right. So we'll be right back after this break here with Jim Galloway, coming to us from Conestoga or from his home out there. And don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
The CWB Association is new and improved and focused on you. We offer a free membership with lots of benefits to anyone interested in joining an association that is passionate about welding. We are committed to educating, informing, and connecting our workforce. Gain access to your free digital publication of the Weld magazine, free online training, conferences, and lots of giveaways. Reach out to your local CWB Association chapter today to connect with other welding professionals and share welding as a trade in your community. Build your career, stay informed, and support the Canadian welding industry. Join today and learn more at cwbassociation.org.
And we are back here on the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and I'm here with Jim Galloway, who right before the break, we went through the trajectory of Jim's life. We talked about where he worked, how he got there, and then as he worked his way, he couldn't escape the management. Then he finally got the nod, the tap on the shoulder to be a teacher, which many of us get kind of voluntold into that job. And then you're at Conestoga. So let's briefly talk about your career at Conestoga as now an instructor. What was it you were initially hired for, and which program and to do what?
Well, so as I had mentioned, I had been volunteering on the program advisory committee, and one of the coordinator of the program at the time, it was a fellow a good friend of mine who's recently passed, Karsten Madsen, and anyway, he and I sort of partners in crime helped develop the third year to the Welding Engineering Technician program.
Right.
So
The
there'd been
advanced
a
diploma.
push to have a more technology-based program,
Mm-hmm.
and that would be meaning adding the third year. So we had the 2-year program, Welding Engineering Technician, and we wanted to develop a third year. So I was part of a team, a small team that helped develop the content of the 3-year Welding Engineering Technology program. At the time, we did not have the 2 programs with robotics and inspection. It was just sort of a mix of, and so I helped help lay out the courses that would be needed, and essentially here it is, year 2000, I guess, and then I was the program had just sort of launched, but they really needed somebody to take the reins of a lot of the courses
Mm-hmm.
at the more technical level. And so since I had when I was working in Toronto, I had also gone to night school and became a certified engineering technologist. So I had sort of added the third year to my 2-year education
Mm-hmm.
by
Like
night school.
manually. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I had taken the metallurgy certificate program at Ryerson University, which is now Toronto Metropolitan University. It was called Ryerson Polytechnic at the time, anyway. But
Mm-hmm.
they had a really good metallurgy program, and so I had studied that at night school when I was in Toronto, and I also took industrial engineering and some other things. So I was now an engineering technologist, sort of by the back door.
Yeah.
And so they needed someone to help teach certain courses. And one of the ones I ended up teaching was, I'm still teaching today, was operations management, and it's like so sort of the manager side of the being an engineering technologist in the
Mm-hmm.
welding and fab world, and also metallurgy. I did the third year metallurgy course, and weld design, and several other courses, welding labs. I helped update a lot of their welding lab activity, and so that's basically my focus was on the welding technology side, and also not too long after that, and you might not know this, but Ontario didn't always have a welding red seal.
That's right. I did know that. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it
I
only
would say
started
it's
about
still
20
kind
years
of
ago.
pretty far behind still, but it's
Yeah,
catching up.
it's not what it is in other provinces.
No,
So,
no.
but one of the problems Ontario had was, yeah, we're going to have a red seal, but now we need people with red seals to teach it. So, so people like me
Mm-hmm.
had to go out and go through the back door of a trade challenger to become a welding red seal. So I could weld, but certainly that I wasn't the world's greatest welder. That's by any means. When I was younger, I was pretty good at it, but again, I was driving a desk more than running a TIG welding machine. So
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
so I did that as well. So I was teaching some skills, but mostly I was teaching the theory and labs and metallurgy and management design, things like that. So that's how I ended up at the college teaching a bunch of different things. As it turns out now, if I look at the 3-year technology program, I probably taught 70% or 80% of the courses.
Yeah, over
Uh,
time. Yeah.
over the time. I haven't taught, the only ones I haven't really taught were engineering drawings and CAD and robotics, but pretty much everything else, including skills, I've taught, and also apprentices as well. So
Mm-hmm. Now,
they're really scraping the bottom of the barrel when they want me to teach an apprentice, a third-year apprentice, how to weld, though. That's
they ran out of options.
yeah. So there's a couple young, really good skilled welders that they have doing that now. But
Good, good. Now, you started at the college right around 2000, somewhere around there.
yeah.
And now you're coming upon, your retirement 2025,
Yep.
25 years in at the
Yeah.
college, and all that time basically within this wet program and its
Yeah.
development over the time, right?
45 years, really, I've been involved in the wet program since
Yeah.
1980. Yeah.
So there's a couple of things that I noted throughout your journey, and in these 25 years at the college, did you still find that passion to I guess have that procedural development, that always
yeah.
wanting that R&D, like you really
yeah.
seemed to light up when you talked about your R&D journey with X company or developing something with Y company. When you go to the college, a lot of people or a lot of instructors I've seen kind of dry up. They seem to lose a little bit of their passion because it can be really repetitive if you're not careful. and just,
Yeah.
you're teaching, class A and class B and repeat next year, right? How did you find a way to keep that flame inside of you lit for those passions?
I've always been extremely fascinated and curious about the welding field.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like some of the other fields where it's more of a science, because there's this huge mix of art buried in behind the
Mm-hmm.
scenes, and technique and mystery,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of mythology too, in terms of why people do things, and why things they are the way they are, and a lot of it's not well researched. And I guess one of my colleagues, he goes like this all the time when he's talking to people. He goes like, when they're talking to him, and what is that? Oh, he said, that's my BS detector. so, so, so he's, my BS detector's going off.
Yeah.
So you get students using the wrong terms,
Mm-hmm.
and just people, as a mystery. A good example, is a sad example too, but we had a graduate, um, over 20 years ago now, and I knew the young fellow, and he went off, working not too far from where I am now, and became electrocuted welding on his job site,
Mm-hmm.
and no one could figure out what had happened, and I was completely confused about how this young man, who had a young fellow, he had a young a child at home, and just been married, and he was one of our apprentices. He had gone to the welding technician program, then he came back as an apprentice, and he was in his third year, and he got electrocuted. And I said, how did this happen? It didn't make any sense. The machine was off, and it turned out to be stray welding current.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my gosh, like how come I've never heard of this before? And that for one thing would really set me on a journey of trying to understand, how can this happen, and how come people don't know it happens, and how can we stop it,
Right.
and things like that. It just drives me nuts when I don't know something, like when I should be able to know it, or I should have heard of it before,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody should have written about it, or somebody, how can we not understand this? And so that's
Yeah.
just one example of one of these mysteries of the welding world. And you talk to 100 welders, and you talk about straight welding current, they don't know what you're talking about, and everybody
Yeah.
calls the current return, the work lead, the ground clamp, when it isn't a ground
Is it
clamp,
the
and things like
ground?
that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's been an ongoing battle for me to make people understand that, look, if you stop and think, you can save your life, like by not burning out the electrical system that powers your machine, so that when you go touch something, you don't get electrocuted, which essentially is what happened to this young fellow.
And
And
it's wild because, like I said, I
mhm.
came up in the mining industry, and I'd be hard pressed to find a welder that had not been electrocuted underground, right?
Yeah,
Because
but
you're
you would have been electrocuted on the secondary. In
well,
other
we
words,
were
you'd be getting a
we
shock off the machine.
no, we would ground to the I-beams on the machines on
Oh,
the first floor and weld
yeah.
on the 10th and run, and
But
we would just arc through the whole building, right?
yeah, again, so and I'm not going to go waste a whole lot
Yeah,
of time, but
yeah.
if people really want to understand,
Yeah,
Dave Heisey, who you know,
right, yeah.
and he's the chair of the CSAW 117.2 committee. He's an electrician, and he's
Mm-hmm.
got a really good handle on the electrical
He
side of the
does, yeah.
business. And he and I are sort of partners in crime in trying to understand this and publicize this whole
Well, and you've done a
phenomena.
presentation that's
Yeah.
fantastic too for us before on
Yeah, yeah.
on the
And
currents
so,
that
but
kill.
there's really two mechanisms where a welder is going to get electrocuted. One is from the primary, which is stray
Mm-hmm.
welding current, and one is from the secondary, which is your normal output terminals.
Right.
So I've been, and that's just one example in the welding
Mm-hmm.
world where people don't understand. They should
Right.
understand. You can read it in a book.
Yeah.
You can open up the manual of your welding machine, and it tells you what to do, but nobody looks at this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then people start developing myths and BS, basically.
Right.
And
Right.
it's the same with metallurgy. It's the same with a lot of welding process theory. People, it's not that it hasn't been written about. It's just that people don't.
People believe the myth.
Well, people would,
Yeah.
I'm very somebody tells me something, I want to see, maybe we can set up an experiment to prove it.
Yeah, let's find out.
Yeah. And so that's kind of what's kept me interested in going, in terms of trying to keep understanding what's happening. And I've also had the opportunity that a lot of welders and even instructors at campuses that may be more remote from where I am, but
Mhm.
I know the research activities at the University of Waterloo and I know you're more familiar with what goes on in Alberta, but
Mhm.
I'm a half an hour away from one of the biggest welding research
Facilities, yeah,
institutes
yeah.
in the world, and I'm very friendly with a lot of the professors up there, and I try to, if I can, attend seminars. So I try to stay in tune with that real academic and high level research world,
The leading
and
edge, yeah.
bridge that back into teaching welders, and try to be that sort of the bridge between those two worlds, and I can understand just enough to be dangerous about what they're doing at the
Mhm.
university, and I know just enough about welding to be real dangerous to work to work in the world of the welders. And there's this opportunity maybe to bridge that gap, and sometimes it means running a little experiment.
Mhm.
It's I know so many little things I want to do, experiments I want to run, and articles I can write about it, and that's what I've been interested in. And I see teaching people is really giving me an opportunity to learn more about that thing. And
Yeah.
if I learn more, and I'll teach you what I know, and then together we'll go off on a journey to find out even more.
Yeah.
And anybody that says they understand welding completely is
It's not a thing.
delusional.
Not a thing. Yeah. I remember someone told me once that you never really learn until you teach. And I didn't really get
That's for
that
sure.
until I taught. When I got
Yeah.
that first, because I was, 20 years on the tools. I know welding, and I got 2 red seals, and I know my stuff. And then you go to teach the first class, and you get a whole bunch of whys and whys and whys and whys and whys. And then you really got to get deep in the barrel to the point where you're like, you hit the wall and you're like, I don't know. I got to go find out, because it's okay to not know, but it's not okay to leave it hanging. I got to find out now, right? Like,
but it's also true that the more you find out,
the less
the
you
more
know.
questions sometimes that come up, right?
Yeah.
So, and so
it's never ending.
These questions just keep popping in my head, like, geez, it would be really easy to set up an experiment to do this, right?
Yeah.
And so, and that's been challenging because colleges aren't really set up to do research.
No,
they'll say
their
are,
funding is limited. Like, I mean, it's
yeah,
and the bureaucracy is slow. The bureaucracy
is almost beyond slow. It's actually it's a terminal illness at some of these places, because they put a bureaucrat in charge of things that they really have no idea about, and
That's
then
right.
they're trying to tell, and even they don't even understand sometimes that there are people,
attached
not
to
everybody,
that,
but there are people who just want to find out because it's interesting,
Mhm.
and they're curious, and
Mhm.
they can't conceive of that, because they're, I guess the opposite of curious is incurious.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so they don't care.
Status quo, move forward, don't care.
Yeah,
right?
that's not me, and I've never been that way, and
Mhm.
it seems like now that my family's more out of the house and whatnot, and I have more time on my hands, it's sort of become my hobby is is finding out more about welding. So,
Well, one of the things that's been a theme since I've known you, and even prior to me knowing you, because I heard of you, in this field, was how involved you always were with your students. Not just as a teacher, because there's lots of great teachers out there, and that's what they do. They teach and they go home. I've had some great instructors that I have no idea, even what they do, or if they have a wife or kids or nothing. Like, it's just they just taught me. But you're the type of teacher that, you put in the extra time. And this podcast is going to be released during, volunteer month here in April. And one of the things that's come up throughout our other podcasts for the month is why, why someone like you, who's got a family, you got a job, you're busy, you're doing things, you're inquisitive, you want experiments, it's not like you don't know how to fill your 24-hour clock, Jim. Like, you can fill your 24-hour clock very easily.
yeah.
But what is it that makes you want to take on that extra task to volunteer for your local associations, going to the seminars that no one makes you go to. It's just to participate and network with these groups, be a part of these things that are, in your field, but outside of your realm of necessary. What is it that makes you want to do that?
Well, even as example, and when I was in college, the local chapter in Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge was called the Golden Triangle.
The Golden Triangle, that's right. Yeah.
And it was was it Welding Institute of Canada, or
it
maybe
was WIC. It was WIC.
No, but it was before, not too long before that. It was the Canadian Welding Society or something. But yeah, I forget what years it changed. But anyway, it might have been WIC by that point, Welding Institute of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But you might not even know this. I mentioned I worked at Ontario Hydro's research division, but just before I had gone there, the WIC was actually the Canadian Welding Society and the Canadian Welding Development Institute. And the Canadian Welding Development Institute had their lab next door to the lab that I was in at Ontario Hydro. They used the space at Ontario Hydro, and then they got their own building in Oakville, in this old elementary school. And they had this big lab in Oakville, Ontario. By that time it had joined and become the WIC.
Yeah, and I have all the original WIC procedural books from my dad from when he was a part of WIC. Yeah, because he was a Boilermaker. He was a part of WIC in the 80s here in Canada. And so when he retired, he gave me all his old books, and I have the full set.
Well, that would have been the what they called the Gooderham modules.
Yeah, the Gooderham modules. I have them all. Yeah, and
but those were
super interesting.
Those were developed. I don't know what year, but yeah, it was so. But the Welding Institute of Canada was a going concern. They had lots of meetings. I remember I saw my first plasma arc cutter
at a chapter meeting
when I was in college. We went up somewhere. Is that one of the gas distributors had it, and you could go in and play with a plasma arc cutter. And I'd never even heard of such a thing. I guess we'd heard of things, but we'd never seen one. Yeah. And so I got to go play with the plasma arc cutter and things like that. Where do you get that experience? And it wasn't just me, but all the students. Like, hey, let's go look at this. It was we pile in a car and it went down to these meetings, and the next thing you know, there's people talking to you about jobs.
And
yeah, it was pretty interesting. And so then when I was up at Bruce Power in the construction, it was kind of remote, so we didn't really get involved from that perspective. But when I moved to Toronto, I was in the research lab, and my boss at the time, he was starting a family and whatnot, and so he didn't really have time for the association, and but he had been heavily involved, and then sort of said, "Hey, you're new and you're just new to Toronto. Why don't you go join the?" So next thing you know, I'm a member of the local chapter, the Toronto chapter.
That would have been the CWA then, yeah.
Well, that was WIC by that.
Still WIC,
it was WIC until late '90s, I think.
I think it was like '98 or somewhere around there, yeah.
Yeah. So and so now I'm going to. I remember I met Dan Taddick in 1984 or something at some meeting at the Oakville place. We used to go to meetings at the Oakville. He was
probably with the gas supplier.
I don't remember why. It was at an aluminum conference. I remember I was going through some stuff. I was cleaning out my desk, and I found this all the list of attendees. I should have kept it somewhere, but
that's awesome.
Dan Taddick was one of them, and I looked through. Hey, Dan Taddick's on there. So I met him way back, right? So yeah. But we had a real going concern, our Toronto chapter, and I was one of the members executive, and we did all kinds of cool stuff. We had regular monthly meetings, and the famous rubber chicken we used to have at the dinner meetings at one of the hotels in Toronto, and all kinds of guest speakers, and got to know a lot of people, and it was great. And I had been involved ever since then. I've been involved in wherever, either the Toronto chapter or now more recently what we call the Kitchener chapter, which is the one close to home here. And certainly, it's met a lot of people, and I've always encouraged the students to get involved, and student graduates, as they come through the technology program, they're going off, and I say, you're moving, I got a job, I'm going to move to Calgary, or I'm going to move into Vancouver, or whatever. I say, well, okay, first thing you do when you get off the plane is
join the local
find
chapter.
out who the local chapter executives are, and volunteer and get to know people and start networking.
It'll help your career immediately.
Oh, and I swear, the one time I was out at we have, the what do they call the meeting? The NAC meeting.
The NAC,
And
yeah.
for those that don't know, it's the National Association of the Chapters, and they have an annual meeting. And I went to one of the NAC meetings, and there was the chair of the Vancouver, Calgary, and Edmonton chapter were recent grads from Conestoga's WeldTech program. Yeah, and I was representing the Kitchener chapter.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it's been a great opportunity. So I always encourage, and then my colleague helped get the encourage the students and mentor them into starting up the Conestoga student chapter. So now I'm kind of got my when we go to the trivia night, I'm not sure which club I should join, but
well, no one from Ontario won this year, so.
Oh yeah, I didn't hear. I didn't even. I was about to log in, but I missed the deadline or something. But
Edmonton took the prize, and not even the U of
good for
A.
them.
Edmonton themselves. So.
Oh, good for them.
Yeah. They did well.
Yeah. So but it's for those who don't really engage in the different chapters, but step forward. It's been literally. I found it as a networking, you can use LinkedIn and all this stuff, but I can pick up the phone and I know this person in the Calgary chapter. I wonder if he knows this company. And sure enough, it's like, was it the old movie 6 Degrees of Separation?
Yeah,
but it's like in the welding field, it's like
3 tops,
maximum 2 maybe. But if I wanted to talk to somebody in Nova Scotia or Newfoundland or whatever, if there's an active chapter out there, I can easily get hold of that person and
it's an easy call,
certainly get and track down something or somebody that would be able to help me with something or answer a question. So it's been great from that perspective. So yeah,
what about the development? You talked about the difference. It's something I talk about with my dad all the time. I'm second generation in the steel fields, and my sister also works in the steel industry, so it's a family affair in our house. So around the kitchen table, I'll listen to my dad talk about stuff, and he initially is the one that got me to join the chapter. I actually was against it. I was like, I'm too cool for that. Like, I'm a welder. Yeah. I know what's up. I know what I'm doing. I'm making good money. I don't need this weird, rubber chicken dinners to prove anything. And I was kind of stubborn about it, but he talks about how much things have changed and also how much things stay the same within, his perspective of working for 50 years in the industry. Now, for yourself, from the volunteer perspective, from, being in college and seeing your first plasma cutters with these, meetings that were being held by the association then to today, what kind of, what's really stood out to you as something that's different, and what has stood out to you as something that's kind of exactly the same?
Well, the challenges are the same in terms of getting one of the sort of negative reputations that we had as an association, especially back 20, 30 years ago, was it's for engineers and salespeople.
Right.
Welders
I still battle that.
Yeah, you got to. Do I have to wear a tie to this? No, that kind of thing. So, welcoming some of the more hands-on people into these meetings and getting them engaged has always been a challenge. It's it's just I always say it's one of the reasons welders are welders because they can shut the helmet
and hide.
They can shut the world out and focus. It's not like you have to interact with people. You can actually, or what does my colleague say? In welding, there are no tears in welding. Or my other colleague said, one of the reasons we put our mask down is because no one can see our tears, right? So, but no, it is a type of thing that it is difficult to get people to engage. And and I think you would say the same in any industrial society like this, if you was the machining society or the I don't know whatever one would be equivalent. But yeah, I think they all struggle with the same thing. So that would be the same. I guess that the good thing would be the ease at which people can participate with remote technologies. And it used to be if you had to even look at Toronto chapter. I want to go to a meeting in Toronto chapter. I leave my house in Kitchener at rush hour. like that's a heck of a trip.
Yeah,
Like
forget about it. It's a couple hours
you
sitting
could,
on traffic.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're going to be a road warrior to do that. And I've done
Hmm.
enough commuting over the years. I don't know if I want to, but if push comes to shove, I'll do it. But
Yeah.
it's not something that I would
But now you have the option to
enjoy.
just sit at your computer and watch it.
Yeah, but it's not the same.
It really isn't, but it's
No,
something. Hmm.
it's easier that way. But also, there's so much more noise now.
Hmm.
It used to be an event when people would, pile in a car and go to the Welding Association meeting and eat rubber chicken and have a few beers and it'd be more like a social event.
Yeah.
And I think some of that's coming back. Like is certainly the Kitchener chapter, and of course Jackie Morris and
Yeah.
and the crew that's sort of leading the charge right now. They've been very very good at the social aspect.
Hmm.
But again, we have to keep in mind that there's a technical aspect, and we have to. But it's hard to get a
A good
sexy
balance. Yeah.
Oh, come out and learn about CSA welding codes. Okay, welding codes and standards. I love that.
Yeah. It's got to be a
But
good mix. You got to have you got to play to
yeah.
all the crowds, right?
Yeah, that's right. And that's always a challenge.
Hmm.
And getting the right topic, getting good speakers, and but I was invited to be a speaker at the Toronto chapter just I guess in December, and I did a talk on the additive manufacturing work that we do at the college, and
Yeah.
it was well attended. Like I couldn't believe it. They had like 70 people.
Yeah. Chapters
Yeah,
across Canada have been having record
yeah,
attendance these last couple of years, and I
yeah,
feel like there's almost a desire post-COVID. Everyone was scared for a bit, but now
yeah,
it's like everyone's like, maybe we really need to interact with humans. Maybe that's
yeah, yeah. No
actually
kidding. Yeah.
important.
Yeah, so that's been encouraging to see that, and I have to hand it to the association in terms of the events they put on nationally, like the CanWeld the last couple of years, and the one in Welding Industry Day that's
Yeah.
coming up in out west. So it's good. So it's to get people out. I know it's still a challenge, and now with everything going on with the economy and tariffs, and it's going to be put a bit downer on everybody. But I think it's important that we do keep interacting as humans on a human level.
Well, and that's the
And
way we're going to solution these things. We're
yeah,
not going to
that's right.
solution
That's
these
right.
tough times alone. And
Yeah.
this is what I was pitching to the company, because even CWB Group, at the end of the day, it's an industry, it's a business. And there's talks about do we cancel this, do we cancel that, and then I had to put my foot down and be like, look, at the end of the day, we're getting all the smartest people in this country in one room. If we're having a bad time in the country, this is probably the best time to get all the smartest people in one room, because
Yeah.
this is a good time to get some opinions and some feedback and get some thoughts, because we need it now.
Yeah, we can't just give up. Like
no, you're not. What are you going to just give up
Yeah.
and walk away? Like, let's get
Yeah.
everyone together and say, all right, well, this is the Canadian Welding Bureau Association. We're Canadians. We're in welding. Let's associate. Let's figure this out,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah. So again, the other thing I was gonna give you a compliment too. I remember, and it was funny. It was actually at CanWeld in 2022, and I was thinking it was in Toronto. It was just after COVID, and you and I were there, and we're sort of standing in a circle with a few other people, and somebody comes running up to you and say, "The speaker just canceled." I don't know who he was or what it was. It doesn't matter. And we're all kind of looking at each other. They need a speaker to jump in, and I'm breaking out in a sweat because people are starting to look at me like, "Holy smokes, what am I going to talk about?" Like, I'm not ready for this. And then of course Max just jumps in and does a great job. It was hilarious. There's probably nobody else in the country that could have just jumped in and did that. So I got to compliment you on that. You've done a great job, and you have a way about you that certainly is it helps. The passion that you exude comes out in many ways, and certainly it was pretty hilarious. So because I just think, oh my gosh, I dodged that bullet, because people started looking at me like I don't have another presentation. I just did two.
Well, it was funny because in the post-event survey of that conference, I won the award for the highest rated speech, the talk of the week, and I thought that was so funny because I had nothing ready.
No notes or anything.
Nothing.
It was like, and you had to do it right then. Like there was no prep time or anything. And it was pretty funny because it wasn't in the welding conference, it was in the manufacturing one or
That's
something.
right. I had to
I'm
do.
not sure how it all works,
I
but
had to do. I basically did an hour on how to you streamline your manufacturing processes on the industry floor. Like,
oh my gosh. And
yeah,
I had a presentation that I probably could have pulled up, but I don't think I had it with me. Because I have, probably a
yeah,
dozen
a few in the pocket. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so it's just I don't know if I had it on the memory stick that I would have I don't know where I could have downloaded it or whatever, but
Well,
yeah.
that compliment goes both ways, Jim, because I've leaned on you pretty heavily at many things. You present for our chapters, you present for our conferences, and
Oh yeah.
your presentations are always well attended.
Well,
So,
that's good. Yeah.
I mean, that's I'm not letting you run away that easily.
Oh
People
no,
talk.
no, it's again, it's I get lots of practice.
Yeah.
The only thing is the students have to listen to me for an hour or two, but
Well, that's what someone said. They're like, oh, well, I think it was someone like in the GTA. They're like, oh, well, we already seen Jim before. I'm like, yeah, but you got to remember that the rest of the country hasn't, right? So
uh,
you can't just hide this guy in your Ontario borders. We can share him.
that's all right. Again, I like I say, so I've got various passions. One would be welding safety, another one would be, the welding procedure development and processes, and the other one now is more this additive manufacturing stuff that we've been playing with at the college, and so that's actually what you asked me. One of the what keeps you excited, but. And I use this analogy. I said, just imagine that aliens drop this new type of metal on the ground out in front of your house, and you go out and pick it up, and this is cool. I wonder how they made this, right? And I wonder what it does. Like
Yeah.
essentially this additive manufacturing.
Can I bend it?
Yeah, like how
yeah.
do I test it? What happens if I heat treat it? How do I make more of it? It's basically like Roswell in 1947. You get this. Oh, well, this is really cool alien metal, right? So, but and that's the way we're looking at the additive manufacturing opportunity. Is that you have this new way of making metal. It's not it's not rolling, it's not extruding,
It's not
it's not
forged.
forging, and it's not casting. I guess it's more like casting than any of the others, but it's different enough that it's just a new manufacturing method, and the material's not really in the codes, and they don't know what to do with it, and
You
you got to
can
test
change
it,
things
prove
on
it,
the
and
spot. Basically, when you can
yeah, like
change the mixes up.
how does it corrode compared to casting? What happens? How do you bend test it? How do you inspect it? All these. So that opened up like a whole world of mystery again of everything that we know about a forging and a casting and a wrought product. Now we have to learn about this new manufacturing method, this new product form. So alloying, mixing alloys, having an alloy that's soft on the bottom, like a softer alloy, gradually becoming a hard
gradient
alloy.
out. Yeah.
Transitioning, and all that stuff is possible. So it's opened up a lot of fun opportunities for me in terms of just exploring.
Well, and it's a hot
exploring
topic.
the welding world.
I was just down in Chile at the University of Santiago, and Dr. Karam Tello, she has she's like devoting basically a big chunk of her lab into the same thing, into WAM, like additive manufacturing, because the same thing. She's like, well, nothing's off the drawing board now, like it's like I'm baking cakes now. Now you just gotta tell me how sweet or how sour or how tall or how short, and I'll just bake the cake, like
Yeah, exactly. Do you want it hard? Do you want it soft? Do you want it hard in this spot and corrosion resistant in that spot?
Do you want it jelly filled, or do you want sprinkles on top? Whatever you want,
basically,
man.
Yeah. It's actually a fascinating. And if you listen to the true experts who are developing this stuff, and there's not many centers of excellence in Canada on this. Down
I should connect you to
University.
I should connect you to Dr.
Ali
Karam.
Nasiri's got some capability, and University of Waterloo has capability,
right.
and University of Alberta has capability. And there's little pockets springing up of expertise, but there's a lot of research to be done, a lot to learn. And certainly Conestoga has played a role. That we started doing this 10 years ago or so. Myself and my colleague, Dr. Tam Nguyen,
Yeah, he's
He's
wonderful.
a
Yeah.
great guy and he's similar to myself. He just can't learn enough about this whole business. So
Well, I have one of your gifts that you gave me, little wham gifts here that you gave
oh
me.
yeah, the coaster.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the coaster. I still got it here. I love it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I show it to people. They're like, "Yeah, what's the big deal?" It's like, oh, you just don't understand. Like,
Yeah, so that is certainly lit a fire under me in terms of trying to learn more about welding and again just a new application for welding and a great opportunity for the welding industry to basically apply themselves to a new
mhm.
technology. So it's been great. So that's been a lot of fun. That gets me opens my eyes again to all the
Yeah.
possibilities. So I've been working on that as well. So
So at the end of the interview now, we've kind of rolled through the train. Now the train's leaving the station, right? You got a month left before the contract's up and summer holidays hit, and this is going to be the long summer now, right? So what are you thinking? What's exciting you now as you look into the window of retirement? And I'm very curious to hear you say, 'cause my dad did not retire well. My dad fought
yeah.
retirement like a grumpy old man. It took him a bit to get into it, like a
Yeah, well, I guess I'm grumpy some days, but generally I try to be pretty positive. But I
Mhm.
really, am I going to fully retire?
Highly
No,
unlikely.
no way.
Yeah, yeah.
The- I'm not going to just,
You're
sink into
healthy,
the,
you're good. Yeah.
yeah, I'm not going to sink into the couch and with a beer in my hand and fade away. There's no way. I just can't. And I'm not going to be out in a golf course. My one fear is that all these little jobs that I told my wife that I'll do that when I retire.
At the
We'll
house.
focus on that when I retire. So all these little projects around the house. My wife's looking at me now. I say, well, you are retiring, right?
Yeah, she'll pull out the master list on you.
So I have to coax it. Well, it's a semi-retirement, so it's
Mhm.
so
Got it.
I
Got
have
it.
to keep playing my games. But again,
Semantics.
for example, I'm going to be go to Red Deer, and
Yeah.
I'll see you out there,
Hmm.
and again, it's what else I'm going to do. Really haven't had a chance to think through it all, simply because I've been in the thick of doing my job, right? So,
Right.
you
Right.
know, today I left the house at 6:45. I was at the campus at 7 o'clock. I was in class from 8 o'clock, and then I had another class, and then I had to teach a lab. And I went down in the machine shop, and one of the fellows was helping me. My colleagues. I was trying to make these bars so I could heat treat them from square to round, and I
Mm.
haven't used a four jaw chuck on a lathe in a long time, so
Oh
he
yeah.
was helping
No.
me.
Get it centered. Yeah.
Yeah, so to get it so I could make these, you need a four jaw chuck, not a three jaw chuck to hold
Hmm.
square things. And anyway, so he was helping with that. So and then I zipped home and jumped on this meeting. So it's been I to stop and think about what my next steps are. I have not done that thoroughly. But it will be something. I just don't know what.
Well, I am hoping, and I'm going to put $5 down, that you still are involved with the chapters, and I still can
Oh
count
yeah,
on
yeah,
you for the
yeah.
volunteer work that you do. Because as a mentor, you got another 30-year career ahead of you, right? Like,
Oh sure, yeah,
because the mentorship side, like, I mean, look at how much I lean on Dan Taddick still.
yeah.
I mean, I understand the value of mentorship. I've had some great mentors. I hope to be a good mentor someday, as you guys are. And and I'm excited for this next stage of your life, because you're gonna get some things will be easier for you, right? Some things will be less bureaucracy. Some things will be more just
Oh
because you wanna, right?
yeah, yeah.
And on the other side of that, there will be days, Jim, where you wake up and think, you know what, I do want to sit on my couch and drink a beer all day, and and you can, and kudos to you, brother. Like, good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I can't. I guess, yeah. It's just that it's like Galloway Unchanged. Oh my God. No bureaucracy.
Yeah, yeah. He's
Yeah.
free. He's free.
But then again, if I wake up and it's a miserable snowy morning and I don't want to get up and do anything, I don't have to, right?
You don't
So
have to. Yeah, that's when it really was good. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So again, I haven't really come to grips with it all, but there's a lot of things I need to learn more and relearn more. So I'm going to be trying to do that as well, and who knows where it takes me.
Awesome. Well, it's been wonderful having you here on the show. It's great. Which is your local chapter that you work with both Kitchener and the student chapter, I assume, in
Well,
Conestoga? Yeah.
technically I'm Kitchener chapter.
Okay.
I'm only student chapter because I'm in the class with the students all the time who are the student chapter. So it's hard to separate the two sometimes, but Jeff Moulton is the key mentor for the student chapter.
Awesome.
And Josh Hyde has been mentoring them for a number of years, but he's very heavily involved in Skills Canada, Skills Ontario. And so he's sort of stepped back from the mentoring the chapter, and Jeff Moulton, one of my faculty colleagues, has jumped into the fray and been helping the students get organized. But the students ultimately run the chapter. But as you can appreciate, student chapters have a high turnover rate.
They do.
It's not because of anything other than they graduate and get jobs.
The turnover rate's equal to success.
Yes, that's right. So, but we've had a thriving student chapter for I'm guessing 10 or 12 years.
Yeah, it's got to be over 10 by now.
Yeah, I don't know exactly, but and all the students who have gone through, and you've met a lot of them who are the chapter chairs of students. But again, so some days I'm not sure which chapter I'm in, but definitely it's the industrial version, not the student version. That's the
Well, if you're in the GTA and you loved this podcast, make sure you join your local chapter. Really, anywhere in Canada, make sure you join your local chapter, because Jim is one of the people you will meet at the networking events and at the things we do. And as much fun as we've had on this podcast in person, we have way more fun. Way more fun.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it is actually, it's very, one thing I've noticed about people in the welding industry, and I don't know if this is your experience, but I find them relatively friendly compared to other skilled trades. And I think I attribute that to, if you're a jerk and you work in a welding shop, you're bringing a punch in the nose, right?
You don't last.
You can't be a jerk because you're just not going to be successful. You're going to get sidelined somehow. I'm sure there are jerks in every field, but generally in the welding world, people I find, are friendly and
I agree.
engaging and
willing to talk. Yeah.
A lot of interesting characters that I've encountered, people I've worked with, funny stories and characters that I've worked with. It's just, it's always been a lot of fun. And that's what I guess that maybe that's what brings me back as much as anything, is just the
people,
getting to in the young people and some of the stories they tell and the things, their experiences. It's and going to work, let's face it, I'm like one of these mythical creatures that sucks energy from
succubus.
Young things. Yes. Well, I didn't want to go that far.
Okay, a welding vampire, we'll call it that.
Yeah, okay, welding energy vampire.
Well, it is true. Like, it's funny that you bring up the, welders are a special type, or people in the steel trades. If I'm out camping or at the mall or something and I happen, I don't know, I'll see someone with like a Miller jacket. I'll be like, oh, hey, are you a welder? My wife at that point will leave me. She's off shopping on her own because she knows for the next hour I'm going to make friends with this random stranger and we're going to talk for an hour, because it's like we just love talking about our industry,
Yeah. You'll see it at every level.
You do.
You see these the people, the researchers at University of Waterloo or University of Alberta, and some of the characters I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But very passionate people and very entertaining and engaging people, and you'll see it. The instructors that you've known and worked with, and the ones that I've known and worked with, and the students and the
suppliers and the salesmen
and the suppliers,
all over, like everyone that touches it.
You just gotta take the, there's always bad, but you gotta appreciate the good, because I think there's a lot of industries where they don't have nearly as much fun.
I always say that I actually don't know of any other industry that has even something remote to what we have as an association. Like, number one, we're over 100 years old. And there's
I'm not yet, but
no, but I mean, the association is over 100.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Right. The electricians, the plumbers, they all have unions. They have things like that, but they don't have outside professional associations that do it just for the sake of the industry.
Well, one of the interesting things, you mentioned electrical. They have something called the Electrical League. Are you familiar with that?
No, I don't.
Yeah, maybe it's just Ontario, but anyway, it's the Ontario Electric League. And I went to one of their meetings one time to talk about welding electrical safety,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't electricians. It was electrical contractors. It was the owners.
Oh yeah, which is kind of
And
a specific audience, I guess. You know.
yeah, but you got the distinct impression that there
Mm-hmm.
was an owners club, and then maybe there's
The
uh
junior club somewhere else.
well, then there's more the trade union club,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
the what is it, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers.
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't think those two groups meld. That's just I could be wrong, and maybe
No, I
I'm
think I
missing
think
something.
I think it is like that because it's like that. I
Yeah,
think in even some of the steel trades, where I
yeah,
mean that's another conversation to have.
yeah. Again, but I think
Yeah,
the Welding Association, the way it's established, is welcoming to both,
yeah.
this
It's neutral
the
ground.
hands-on
Yeah.
folk and the business owners and the engineering people that support it, and that's where the networking comes in and the
Mm-hmm.
engagement comes in. So,
Well, awesome, Jim. Thank you so much, and I know you had a great last night. They
oh
had the
yeah,
roast
yeah.
of Jim Galloway at the Conestoga event last night there.
Well,
Uh,
I told the students it wasn't about me. It was for those who aren't aware what we're talking about. Last night, the student chapter had their awards night and gala,
mm-hmm.
and so our student chapter set up the students set up an event at a local brew pub, and in Cambridge, and it was 175 people and over 20 award winners
That's amazing.
of student awards and some significant prizes donated by industry. It was a
Mm-hmm.
really fun event. Yeah, real fun. And some of our technology students did presentations of their third year technical projects, at the capstone projects that they do.
Capstones, yeah.
So it was really really great event. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that they had the time to have you out there and honor you too as well.
Well, again, I insisted it wasn't going to be about me. So they said a few words and then I deflected and
Awesome, Jim. Well, take care and
oh, thanks a lot, Max.
thank you
Yeah.
for the time. And for the people
Yeah.
that have been following along, please, get in with the associations, get in with the chapters. You can see the wonderful people that we have supporting us. Also, talk about the trades with your families. Talk about it with the kids. Talk about it with your nieces and nephews. These are wonderful careers. You get the breadth of careers is so wide that you can go from you can be a doctor, you can be anything in this field from right from the floor to the top. So, don't be worried about finding something you'll like in this niche. There's a niche for you. And of course keep following along with the podcast. We really appreciate it.
Yep. You can be a welding engineering technologist too.
Yeah. At Conestoga program. Yeah. Awesome. Well, everyone take care and stay tuned for the next episode.
We hope you enjoyed the show.